Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlawn Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlawn Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Access to Democracy. I'm your host today, Steve Francisco, and it's a real pleasure to welcome a new guest to our studio today. He is Tim Leslie, the Deputy Sheriff of Dakota County. Welcome to Access to Democracy, Tim.
Thank you, Steve. Nice to be here.
Pleasure to have you. And we were saying just before we started recording today, you have quite an amazing biography. You've had a career of over 30 years in law enforcement. Tell us a little bit about yourself for people who may not know you and are not familiar with some of your experience.
Well, I will. Thank you. Yes, I do have a long career, been around a while. I started my career actually in the city of Minneapolis for the Minneapolis Park Police. I was a park patrol agent, and I was interested in that line of work for a variety of reasons. I was influenced by some people at my high school, some police officers, and a good friend of mine's brother-in-law was a police officer, so I started riding along with him and kind of got the bug for that. And then began to test, went to school, Mankato State University, which had a great, still does have a really good law enforcement program there. Attended there, and I began to test, and I started my career at the St. Paul Police Department in 1980. Spent 23 years there, a wide variety of assignments. That was, one thing about the St. Paul Police Department. If you didn't like what you were doing for very long, just wait, because it was going to get switched.
You'd be doing something else.
Yeah, I had a lot of assignments, and it was just helped develop me as a law enforcement professional to what I do today. And about 1999, I got promoted to senior commander, so I had a district, and then I had
the east side of St. Paul. Is that
correct?
Right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and that was an exceptional experience. I had wonderful people working for me. Great community that was engaged in trying to get a handle on crime and neighborhood problems. And I just had a wonderful experience there. Shortly after that, I moved into Bill Finney's office as chief of staff, spent some time there, and then I got sent back to the Central District as senior commander, and I was there and then I got a call from the Department of Public Safety Commissioner who said, geez, I'm looking for an assistant commissioner. What do you think of that opportunity? And I'm not a self-made man, Steve. I've had a lot of people around me that have given me advice over the time.
That's true for all of us, isn't it?
Amen.
We've all had mentors and people help us along. I saw one of the things in your background, too. You were a member of the SWAT team in the St. Paul Police for a while, and then were leader of the team for a while?
Yeah, I was. As a police officer, I was on the SWAT team as a sergeant, and then I commanded the SWAT team for about 3 years. We lived through the Y2K experience, which of course everyone thought the world was coming to an end, and
it didn't.
It didn't. Yeah. So I did that. Yeah. For a while at St. Paul, I was in charge of everything that went to the bathroom outside. I had the K9 unit, the mounted unit, and then the SWAT guys. Guys and gals tend to the bathroom outside a little bit.
So when you were in the commander of the East Side Division in St. Paul, too, a neighborhood that underwent a lot of transition, I imagine, during the time you were there. A lot of older people were moving on or passing on, and new immigrant community that emerged in St. Paul, too, with a lot of people from the Hmong community and other immigrants.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We faced a lot of challenges, but it just seemed like that was a kind of a grassroots effort. People would come together for community meetings. They put their differences aside towards public safety and it was an enjoyable experience for me. I learned a lot from that.
We were talking just before we started recording about the fact you and our paths may have crossed actually about 20 years ago when I was working for the late Congressman Bruce Vento, and I was covering law enforcement issues for him. And one of the things we did was get a community policing grant from the U.S. Department of Justice for the city of St. Paul.
That's correct.
And I remember we brought Attorney General Janet Reno at that time came to town and met with Chief Finney and with the mayor, and so I think you may have been a part of that too.
Yeah, I may have been
but
there.
I know community policing really, that idea really took off back then about the idea of getting officers more out of the cars, into the communities and talking to people. How does that relate in a place like Dakota County, where you have a diverse population that's spread out over a bigger geographical area?
That's funny because I was talking to some of the command staff about that recently, and one of the captains who'd been around a while, 25 years, he said he was at a training event on community policing, and his reaction to us, we've been doing this. This is what we do here in Dakota County. We have the time, because we don't run necessarily call to call, that we stop at the businesses. How are you doing today? Stop at the schools. How are you doing today? And make sure that people are engaged in their own safety. You know, it's not just about the police providing safety. It's about the citizens working with the police and the sheriff's office to make sure the community is safe. So we're all in it together. And so it was kind of a remarkable conversation we had, because he was saying this is how we do policing in Dakota County, is engaging the community, letting them tell us what their problems are, and then helping find solutions together.
Very good. You had some big news this past summer. Was it summer or fall when you announced that you will be running to succeed your boss? The current sheriff, Dave Bellows, has decided to step down after how many years of service?
Dave has got,
been
I think,
here for a while.
34 years of service.
Yeah.
I think it's 12 at the Dakota
sheriff
County
of
Sheriff's
Dakota County.
Office. He's been the sheriff for the last
Right.
4, or almost 5.
And you announced that you'll be running to succeed him, and you certainly come with an impressive resume of credentials and experience, and you have some key endorsements right out of the box. I noticed Sheriff Bellows endorsed you, and also Dakota County Attorney Backstrom has endorsed you for this position too.
That's correct.
Is there anything that you might do that when you look at this, and should you be elected in November, is there anything that you see that you might do a little bit differently, or some new initiatives that you might be excited to undertake as the new sheriff?
I paused to think about that, and Dave and I have worked well together for the last over 4 years. He's been a wonderful mentor to me on the Dakota County Sheriff's Office and the things that happen there and the things we need to be aware of. If I was going to make any changes, it maybe we probably will focus more on youth initiatives, maybe making sure our kids are safe. I know that's a very broad. The other piece, though, that he and I both share is the technology changes that we're facing towards the future. I think an eye on the future is probably going to be the mantra, of my administration, is that how are we positioned towards the future? Everyone carries a cell phone. There's iPads, hard drives.
You have computers in the patrol cars, in the sheriff's cars.
The patrol cars the deputies operate, they're like the flight simulators. I mean, it's tremendously full of technology, and I think we talked about it the other day. I think the equipment in the squad car is worth more than the car. With all the stuff that goes on in there. So, focus on technology, a focus on youth. The deputies that we have are well educated. I guess I'd like to say they're the best trained, the best equipped. And keep that as our focus and maintain that for the future.
And tell us about the sheriff's office, because I think it's a branch of our government that a lot of citizens may not know that much about. Like, how big is the Dakota County Sheriff's Office? How many officers do you have? How big is your budget?
Yeah, well, we have about 200 employees. 75 to 80 of them are what they call licensed deputies, so they are licensed peace officers. Another 75 to 80 are correctional deputies, and they are in the jail. They operate and help us manage the jail. And then we have, of course, a large support staff that makes sure that we get our bills paid and the reports written and all that. We couldn't do it without them. They're wonderful people. So we have an $18 million budget. Half of that is spent inside the jail, just managing that operation. It's a 263-person bed jail. So at any given day, we have between 230 to 260 people in there. That
I was just about to ask you that question.
Yeah, it's quite the operation, and we got to provide for their health and welfare and their food and all those things. And it's a business that we don't want repeat business, though.
Right.
We just as soon not have the people come back. So.
When you have people in the jail, what is the most common offense that people are arrested for?
Well, I thought it would be DWI.
That's what I would have guessed.
But
it's not.
I think 75% of the people in our jail are there for felony charges of some magnitude. So it could be felony DWI. So so it's a little more serious than we thought. The average stay is about 5 days. Again, a jail is different than prison.
Right.
In that it's a temporary. It's usually pre-sentence. However, if you're sentenced by a judge, you can be sentenced to the county jail. And so we have less than a year offenders in there. We have those who are there just to serve their weekend time for a DWI offense. It's quite fascinating operation, actually.
And you mentioned a budget of, did you say 18 million a year?
Correct.
And I assume that some of the money you get, well, a good chunk is probably from the state of Minnesota. And would some of the money also be federal money that you get? You must be getting some federal assistance.
A lot of that, most of our budget money is the tax levy money, property tax levy. Yeah, we get a few grants. We get a little bit here and there from the state, but for the most part, it's from the Dakota County residents that we tax, the county commissioners tax.
So describe your relationship, if you could, Tim, the relationship between the Dakota County Sheriff's Office and local police departments like the Egan Police Department. What kind of interactions do you have with various departments that are located in the county?
We have a wonderful relationship with our partners in law enforcement in Dakota County. The 11 chiefs that, I know them by first name. I have their phone numbers on speed dial and vice versa. We work with each other. I think that what the community needs to know is most of our police departments, we rely on each other to get, we don't staff for the major event. So if something major happens, we share and help each other. And that happens on a day-to-day basis. I have a great relationship with Jim McDonald, Jeff Johnson, the assistant chief.
Jim has been a guest on this show several times, as you might imagine.
You got a gem there. The city of Egan has a gem. He's a wonderful man.
Yep.
So we have a great relationship with our chiefs. Much more collaborative than people would imagine. The Dakota County Drug Task Force is a joint powers agreement between all the cities and the county to provide for a comprehensive approach to the drug problems that we see in Dakota County. Rather than each city have their own drug unit, where, again, maybe the viewers don't know this, but drug dealers pay no attention to boundaries. They just come and go as they please. And so that helps us to bridge that gap and make sure that we follow them in and out of communities when they're trying to apply their trade. So I think that kind of approach really has been helpful. Our drug task force is wonderful. We have a joint powers agreement for our SWAT operations in the county as well, so we share those as well. So we have a bunch of things we're working on.
Is there any joint training that goes on, for example, between Egan Police Department and Dakota County Sheriff's Office? Do you train together for some of these contingencies?
School safety right now is we're doing what they call 3 Echo training, which is a kind of a new model. It kind of came out of what we've seen over the course of time at school violence events. Is that, it used to be when I ran the SWAT team in St. Paul, it was wait for the SWAT team to get there. But we realized that these events in schools are about 5 minutes in length, 3 to 5 minutes in length. So you don't have time to wait for the SWAT team to get there. And that's what happened in Columbine, of course.
The horrific tragedy in Columbine, and then, of course, Newtown, just indescribable. And I think not just a tragedy, obviously, for the families who lost loved ones in that, but a tragedy for the law enforcement officers who responded to it, too.
Tremendous trauma to them, to the officers.
Yeah, that's what to come upon a crime scene like that, it's almost unimaginable.
So what we hear from the community is, I don't think they really care what color the uniform is. Drives first. As long as they're trained and are ready to act when they get there.
Yep.
So as I have deputies that traverse the whole county, serving, paper service or transporting prisoners to and from, they traverse our county, and so they have to be ready to respond. So we do train together and prepare, know what the plans are from each community, so we can help them out if we need to.
Good to know. Let's talk about drugs in a little more detail here. There's a series currently running on CNN that just began last night. I don't know if you happen to catch it. I watched it last night, called Chicagoland, and it's about the horrific problems with gang violence and drugs in several neighborhoods in Chicago and how it's impacting quality of life. What is the situation with illegal drug use in Dakota County? We had heard a few years back about really kind of an epidemic of crystal meth use. And now we keep hearing about more synthetic drugs that are coming on the market, and there are reports about increased use of heroin. Are we seeing that here in Dakota County as well?
We have seen an increase in heroin recoveries of the drug at our drug task force. I was reading the annual report, we just got it at our last meeting. And I think it's up about 100% from prior years. So if we recovered a pound, this last year we recovered 2 pounds. So it's that's just startling. However, what we've done in terms of a strategy towards that is the theory behind heroin. The search for heroin is somewhat related to pharmacy and prescription drug addiction. Mostly opiates, the opiate derivatives, that of morphine, basic OxyContin, Vicodin, those kind of over-the-counter painkillers that are readily available in homes that people don't dispose of. So what we've done is we've provided now 11 prescription drug drop-off sites in the county. Each city has one. And so the residents of the county can drop off their old prescriptions, get rid of them without any worry. We're going to take care of getting it disposed of in an incinerator at our cost. And so since we've started that program in 2012, we've had a 16% reduction in those kind of cases of pharmaceutical prescription drug cases at the Drug Task Force. So we think we're starting to stem the tide a little bit.
Sort of a proactive approach that's really starting to produce some results.
People get hooked on these prescription drugs, and then they try to mimic the high by getting heroin, which is actually a very similar high to these prescription drugs. So unfortunately, by reducing the availability of prescription drugs, sometimes they've turned to heroin. And so now we have to go after that.
After that, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you about another issue that's been in the news, and our viewers have undoubtedly heard something about. We know that in the state of Colorado recently, voters approved a referendum that basically decriminalized the possession and personal use of marijuana, although the state is regulating it to some extent. And other states have looked at this, too. There's another aspect to this that has come up as well, which is the medical use of marijuana, really kind of a totally different issue. Medicinal use of marijuana to alleviate pain and suffering for people perhaps with terminal illnesses, or sometimes not even terminal illnesses, but chronic illnesses. And there seems to be a real split of opinion on this. A Minnesota poll recently indicated that a lot of Minnesotans seemed inclined to be open to the idea of medical use of marijuana. What are your thoughts about the legislature making a change to approve the use of medical marijuana?
There's a law enforcement coalition that is opposed to medical marijuana in its current bill, the legislative bill that's at the legislature today. And that coalition is the Minnesota Peace and Peace Officers Association, which is the line of police officers, their union or association. Minnesota Sheriff's Association is part of that. Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, Minnesota County Attorneys Association. We've formed a coalition. So we're opposed. I think Governor Dayton has indicated that until law enforcement moves off of this, that he wouldn't sign the bill, and that could change any day.
So let me probe a little deeper about
Sure.
that, though. Is the feeling on the part of law enforcement officers that the state is incapable of being able to regulate medical marijuana and its use in conjunction with healthcare professionals? Or is it really more this argument about, and we've heard this one in the media, about, well, marijuana is a gateway drug, that it leads to other types of drug abuse, even though I haven't really seen much evidence of that to be the fact, to be the case.
Sure. Well, I think some of the things that there was just an event on 60 Minutes recently that talked about what they've seen in Washington and Colorado. I think some of the concern on the part of law enforcement is this is the medical marijuana initiative is an attempt then to get marijuana then legalized. It's the ultimate goal, and it's
well. We should be clear, though, shouldn't we, Tim, that Colorado was clearing it for recreational use, right?
True.
Whereas, and I understand that point, but just to be clear so our viewers know, the Colorado referendum was about recreational use. What we're talking about here in Minnesota is not recreational use, it's for strictly limited medical use. So.
Correct. And the point I was trying to make is that once the door is opened to medical marijuana, then it's not further to go to get recreational. And that if you look at the 60 Minutes piece, they talk about the marketing to children. You know, the brownies, the Rice Krispie treats, the soda, the ice cream, all with THC built in. And then they also talked about the fact that the medical marijuana advocates make it sound like it's for, the elderly, terminally ill, but what they've seen in Colorado and Washington is it's a 32-year-old male with migraines. That's who gets most of the prescriptions. So again, I'm reading from, and I'm watching the television, and I'm just trying to keep, I guess the term that I would use is, rough road ahead, proceed with caution. And we want to watch what happens in other states and then model something that works for us here in Minnesota. Where's the medical community? Where's the AMA? What did they say about it? And some of the things I've heard is, let's isolate the THC, which is the active ingredient. Let's isolate the CBD, which is the other active ingredient that helps reduce seizures and reduce pain and those kind of things. Let's isolate that and then use that in pill form or liquid form or something rather than smoking it. You know, because it's rather ironic that we just fought this tobacco fight and then here we are going to have people smoking.
Well, I think you point out something really interesting there, that it actually is technically feasible to do what you just said, to isolate it. And so really then you're left with the issue about appropriate regulation. There was some very emotional testimony, as you probably saw in the news, at the state legislature just last week.
And I don't think law enforcement begrudges anyone.
So you do leave the door open to the possibility that there could be some accommodation on this and some compromise that could come out.
Steve, my mom died of breast cancer, and when she was dying of breast cancer, she needed morphine. She wasn't smoking opium. She was taking morphine, and and I knew exactly how much to give her because the doctor knew the dosage to give. And I think that's the other piece of THC and CBD is you want to know the dosage, how it interacts to other medicines that you may be on.
Let's shift, if we could, to another issue that the legislature is considering, having to do with reforming Minnesota's sexual offender commitment process. You are well aware, I'm sure, U.S. Federal Judge Donovan Frank recently made very clear that if the legislature basically didn't rewrite Minnesota's statute, that he was prepared, it sounded like, to declare our state law unconstitutional, which could result in the release of convicted sexual offenders onto the street. But also you have this dilemma with people being indefinitely committed and problems about constitutionality. What are your thoughts about Minnesota's sexual offender commitment process?
Wow, that's a good question. I have not probed that or been briefed on law enforcement's position. Of course, I'm sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and what struck me about Magistrate Frank's or Judge Frank's position was that none of these people have been convicted of a crime. And I get that. And so that strikes, that strikes me. But the other piece is, can we release them into the community safely? Is there a way to release them and uphold public safety? With the technology we have today, where my cell phone can tell me where to go at any given time, and tell me where I am at any given time, you'd think there'd maybe be a way that we could use technology to at least track these individuals when they're out in our community. Because I think, I hate to be in a situation where we're going, uh-oh, now what have we done? Because we have the first kidnapping or the first sexual assault with one of these released offenders, and we've really not achieved our mission of public safety, and that's my goal.
So as you look at it right now, what would you say is the biggest law enforcement challenge facing you here in Dakota County over the next few years?
I think we need to continue to get the necessary resources to maintain a very well-educated and strong, well-trained workforce. I'm worried here. I was just talking to a chief the other day who said that his city manager told him that 2015 is going to be a bad year for economics. And I kind of paused and I said,
he has a crystal ball?
I said, I hadn't heard that. And so this was my first pause of, we really don't know what the future holds. 2009, I don't think anyone knew about the Great Recession, that the housing bubble was going to burst. And of course, that's a whole different conversation. And there was a whole bunch of different reasons for why that occurred. But of course, government bared the brunt of that. I mean, we had to have an early retirement. We had to lay people out. There was a couple layoffs. So, I mean, we faced the piper
challenges
on that
ahead.
Yep.
Let me get this one in real quick too. We've seen people misusing the internet and social media, issues about that have been discussed at great length about sexual predators misusing internet, but also the use of social media for bullying people. We saw a case up in Anoka County recently that got a lot of play. We have just about a minute left, but could you give me your thoughts about what can the Dakota County Sheriff's Office be doing on enforcing laws against internet crimes and misuse of social media? Well,
the Don Goodmanson and Dave Bellows were very visionary when they established our electronic crime unit. We have a computer forensics unit that's what they do, is they investigate computer facilitated crime. Internet crimes against children, they look at when there's the exchange of pornography amongst adults through the community. Our investigative unit helped in the Howland murder trial. This was the one in Apple Valley from last year that we just got a first degree murder conviction. I mean, this is we're looking to expand it, frankly, because the computers aren't going anywhere, I don't think.
No.
I don't think they're a flash in the pan.
And I'm afraid we're going to see more of these types of issues coming up in the future. Well, Tim, thank you very much for being our guest. Good luck as you run to succeed your current boss. And we're going to have you back on to talk about these issues in the future, too.
Love to do that.
Thank you very much. Tim Leslie, Deputy Sheriff of Dakota County. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Steve.